So what brings you to the Graphical Web Conference, Amanda?
Well, we were asked along by Alan, the organiser, and we've done some work in the past with the ONS, so we're really happy to come along and support the conference. We're actually doing 3 different things here. I've just given a keynote speech, which I enjoy very much, just about the work of visual journalism at the BBC. One of my assistant editors has been on a panel about storytelling, and we're going to run 2 workshops, one on R and one on GIS. For people, so quite a lot of different things that we're contributing.
And how can the BBC benefit from those people you are meeting and your colleagues are meeting today and over the weekend?
Well, it's really inspirational to go along to some of the sessions and just see what other people are up to, and the really creative ways that other people who aren't even necessarily journalists are telling stories. So I think that's the first thing for me, is to see how people are telling stories in different ways and ways that maybe we haven't thought of. I think also from a technical point of view for our developers, understanding the way that various bits of software and kit work and being able to talk to people who've used them in practice and iron out different issues, that's really valuable for them too.
And drawing upon some of those themes that you mentioned in your keynote speech, for example, you've been collaborating with academics on some of your recent visual journalism at Imperial College. How important is collaboration to this field of journalism?
I think it's really important. I think, yes, we collaborated with Imperial College on a project called How to Put a Human on Mars, but we also collaborate with a different set of academics to produce our class calculator. And we use academics not only because they're doing really interesting research that perhaps will make a good story for us, which is what happened with Mars and the class calculator, but also we collaborate when we have an idea ourselves. For example, our NHS winter project, where we were tracking the performance of accident and emergency departments in hospitals in the UK, using academics to check that we weren't getting it wrong in terms of our methodology, and that our conclusions that we were drawing from bringing various data sets together were the right conclusions, which you can only really know if you're A, an expert in statistics, but B, an expert in that area. So we use academics in lots of different ways.
So in terms of collaboration in the broader picture, for example with your audience, how do you go about engaging with your audience, collaborating to ensure you are producing the best quality visual journalism available?
Yeah, I mean, the BBC has a set of values, and one of its values is audiences are at the heart of everything we do. And I know that sounds very, very trite, but actually, if that's not true in our daily journalistic lives, then we might as well pack up and go home, really. So I take that very seriously. So particularly when we're doing something new that we haven't done before, and we genuinely don't know how it's going to be taken by our audiences, we make sure we have an explicit call to them on the page where that new content is sitting, and say, look, tell us what you think. And this has happened in an experiment that we've been doing with a bit of Mozilla software called Popcorn, where we made a video about Islamic State, and it had a timeline embedded in a video that triggered various graphs and maps and other content on a screen as you watched that you could interact with. And what we found from that feedback was people were saying, look, we really like this in lots of ways, but we had to watch it twice to kind of start really understanding everything. And they basically said, you've got too much in here, too much happening at the same time. So the next time we do it, next month in fact, a thing on child mortality, we're going to strip it right back and make it much more simple, and again ask the audience for their feedback and see how we need to adapt it further going forward. So it's really really important to us.
That feedback that you received, what does that tell you about the audience in terms of what they want from the visual journalism, specifically in relation to the notion of story?
Well, I think the kind of feedback you get is really granular. I mean, they sort of say, look, I understood it up to here, but then you lost me because this thing happened and I didn't know why. So it actually tells us how we're telling the story well or how we're telling the story badly. So you get a lot of verbatims, emails, literally hundreds of emails that come in and tell you very, very detailed bits of feedback. But also we can look at the analytics that we have for every page. We actually see when people clicked, when they didn't click, how far they click through something, when they stop watching, and that also gives us quite a good kind of analytical way of seeing where we probably went wrong.
And what challenges exist within making that data visually appealing, interesting and ultimately consumed by the audience?
Yeah, well, there's all sorts of different challenges. I mean, I think the the temptation is to make it too complicated, and I think that's, you know, a lesson that we learn repeatedly, and sometimes when we think we haven't made it too complicated, we still have. And it's about making something very simple and taking the audience through it, but allowing them to get more depth if they want it. But it has to work on that first level, which is telling a simple story. And because we can do lots of whizzy things, and because we have got, you know, we've got charts and graphs and video and lots of stuff that we can do, our temptation is always to kind of have too many bells and whistles. So we need to kind of keep looking at the fundamental storyline, the narrative through that interactive, and then allow them to dive in and go further where they want to.
What do you say to those people that news nowadays has become perhaps too dependent upon technical wizardry and there is some lack of focus upon the story?
I don't think that's true. I just think it's kind of an ever-changing canvas on which to paint. You know, there's not one way of telling a story, and you know, every 6 months somebody invents a new way or a new bit of software or something that enables you to tell a story in a way that you couldn't before. So it's not like there's one way to tell a story and that's the only way and forever and ever it shall be. It's a constantly changing landscape, and so you're constantly learning and trying to figure out what's the best way to tell individual stories.
And in this landscape, how does the BBC's use of video fit in nowadays?
Yeah, well, we are a big broadcasting organisation, so we do have a lot of video. We also have the ability to create specialist sort of video, 3D modelling, virtual reality, that sort of thing. So we ought to be absolutely at the kind of cutting edge of trying to think about how, when you bring TV and the web, particularly in the case of video together, how to tell stories well. So our big thing in the last year, and we're still doing it at the moment, is a number of different pilots with different companies and some in-house as well, around interactive video itself. So instead of having a video and something interactive happening next door to it, everything happens in the same video, and so you click on something in the video, it may be a hotspot or a link, and something comes up in the video without you having to go be taken out of that experience. It's very, very early days, and again, I'm getting a lot of audience feedback, but I really think it's the right place for us to be experimenting.
So in relation to cutting edge, what is the BBC specifically doing in terms of its visual journalism team led by yourself in relation to mobile?
So back in 2013, for the first time, mobile overtook desktop in terms of a source of traffic for our BBC News website. That was at weekends. We now find that's a phenomenon that happens during the week as well. An increasing number of people are coming to our site and accessing our content through their mobile phones and tablets, but predominantly mobile phones. So whilst obviously one of our responses to that is responsive design, so a single code base that you make, you resize for each size screen. That's one answer, but I think increasingly we're beginning to sort of look and say, well, that's one answer. You know, it's basically making your desktop site work on mobile is one answer, but is that enough? You know, lots of the new startups, you know, BuzzFeed and Vox and people like that and AMPs, you know, they're creating things which are mobile first. You know, they don't think about the desktop, they think about the mobile audience, what mood they're in, what they're doing, and how they want to access content. And so we've started to dip our toes in that water quite a lot as well. And we've invented something called Go Figure. It's very simple. It's a daily infographic. It has one or two big numbers on a big story of the day. Not necessarily a big serious story, but sometimes can be something that's a science or a technology story or just something that's quite fun. And we do a beautiful design or a picture with some text. And what we find is more people click back to our website to look at the full story when we do this, because it's specifically tailored, it's the right size for Facebook, it's the right size for Twitter, right size for Pinterest, than they do when we just put up either some text or even a very good photograph on mobile. There's something about the text and the picture interacting that tempt people to click more. So that's our first experiment. I think it's just the first of quite a lot of things that we'll be doing about things that work on mobile in their own right, not just things that have been resized for mobile.
That clicking back notion then, what do you think that says about the audience's desire to actually consume what could be considered to be more highbrow news or more complicated news?
I don't know what it says really. I think people, if you can get people's interest and they click back, then they'll probably kind of be very happy to learn more about a story. But I mean, these stories are, you know, a whole range of different stories. They're not necessarily highbrow. Sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not. But I think people, a lot of people are accessing BBC News for the first time because they have a mobile phone and because we're on mobile. You know, these are people that never watch 10 o'clock news and never go to our desktop site. So these are new people, quite often younger audiences, but not exclusively, who are coming to BBC News possibly for the first time. And so they're exploring, you know, in a way that is a bit unpredictable for us. But we need to be there and show them that we have something to offer them.